Hello everyone and welcome back to the Silicon Sounds YouTube channel, Audio for the Rest of Us. Today we have a very involved review. I'd like to call this review The Musical Bold and Beautiful. Today we have the pleasure of taking a look and listening to the Audiosense DT600. Let's get right into it. There's a lot to go through here. The Audiosense DT600 is an all-balanced armature IEM sporting 6 Knowles units per side in a very stunning and high-quality shell. You can see the armatures inside a little bit. You can see the sound tubes. Construction is incredible on this thing. Let's get into it a little bit more. The DT600 is not a one-trick pony, and Audiosense have seen fit to include an 80-ohm adapter in the box. Now, what does this do? Actually came outside of the box, but it's included. Earlier adopters of this earphone may not have received this. What this 80-ohm adapter does is it changes and alters the sound signature significantly, almost as if you're getting 2 different earphones in one. So for all intents and purposes, this affords the DT600 2 distinct sound signatures. The beauty, though, is not only skin deep. Audiosense have tuned the DT600 in a very well with bass that defies any BA bass quote-unquote definition. Bass that sounds more like it's coming from a dynamic driver than a balanced armature. Absolutely. We'll get into that a little bit later. The DT600 is actually very easy to drive, but benefits from high-quality sources. I have a few here. My favorite Apogee Groove, which I'll be reviewing. It's an oldie but a goodie. Iffy Hip DAC, and others. Attention paid to cable and tip rolling will also yield significant benefits. As well, the DT600 is very sensitive in that regard. So pay attention to your cable tip rolling and pairing it with a very capable source. The difficulty in evaluating such a product stems from 2 distinct tunings that are available by virtue of the impedance adapter. The addition of this changes the tuning significantly enough that this can be considered almost 2 different IEMs. Without the adapter, the DT600 has obvious bass emphasis, but is still open in detailed mids and treble if they lag somewhat behind the output of the lower registers. Still very open, very clear, very detailed. When using the 80-ohm adapter, the DT600 presents more of a tastefully done V-shaped signature with elevated treble and more apparent air and sparkle. This will, in effect, affect how you search for synergy with this IEM. So the 2 different tunings have 2 different sets of requirements with respect to synergy. And with synergy, we're talking about tips. Right here, I have one of my faves, the Final Audio E Originals, for example, may work well when using the 80-ohm adapter, which, by the way, is my favorite configuration, versus without the 80-ohm adapter, where other tips may probably do a little bit better. Being a fan of bright neutral tunings, more often than not, my personal preference is to use the 80-ohm adapter, but I have listened extensively to both configurations in order to get a more global view of what the DT600 is capable of. So here I'm going to show you some graphs real quick detailing the differences with and without the 80-ohm adapter. In essence, the 80-ohm adapter gives us the opportunity to have and enjoy 2 distinct tunings with the Audiosense DT600. In this graph, you can see its effects quite clearly. In the lower sub-bass, there really isn't that much of a significant difference. In the mid-bass, though, there is some pullback when using the 80-ohm adapter with a heightened presence in the upper mids and treble region, all while not affecting its overall clarity any way, shape, or form. As you can see from the graphs, things get very interesting with this IEM. Now let's talk about specs. 6 Knowles Balanced Armatures with 3-channel sound guide with a frequency divider. There's a lot of tech inside these shells. And unlike many others, they don't just shove a bunch of a number of BAs into it and try to get sound. These are actually, time was spent tuning these. again, if we see much closer, you can see the sound tubes and the armatures. Very well done. Impedance is 14 ohms. Sensitivity is 106 decibels plus or minus 3 dB. Frequency range, well, 20 to 22 kilohertz. Take that with whatever you wish. They say that there's a 30 decibel isolation. I would confirm that they do isolate a little bit more than others, but there's a caveat with that. Uses an MMCX connector. And they're medium weight, 5.4 grams per earpiece. I'd say they're on the light side, considering all the tech that's inside of them. Let's talk about build, quality, and fit. Build quality is exemplary. And not only for the IEM, but everything included. I'm not using the stock cable right here, but I will show you what's included in a second. They're stunning to look at. The unboxing experience is definitely a premium one, but not as interesting as with, for example, the Whizzer HE01 or the T-Force Wan Li, or even the Care Believe. So the boxing experience is not as complete as those, but again, it is definitely with a high quality and attention to detail. Selection of tips is good, and the included stock cable is also a very high quality, as we'll see just now in a few pictures. Not the best I've seen in the over $100 bracket, but definitely something that you would keep. It's not a throwaway. The cable that was included with the Wan Li and the Care Believe is of apparently slightly nicer in terms of quality. Just the overall haptic of it feels a little bit better for those two cables than the one that came with the DT600. Still, the DT600 is nothing to sneeze at. Obviously, all around, if you look at the packaging and included accessories, the DT600 is not a budget unit coming in at its price in neither form nor function. With respect to fit, the DT600 is on the large side of medium, as you can see, but I had no issues with achieving a secure and comfortable fit in my ears. I did not have much issue whatsoever putting them in, but I did have one small thing that kept propping up, and is with pressure on insertion. Although my understanding is there is a vent, you can see it right there. Still, I had pressure on insertion, and eventually I found a way to insert them while minimizing this issue. So they do seal quite securely once in your ear. Now we're going to take a look at some of the accessories and the presentation that you'll get once opening the box of the Audiosense DT. As with everything else with the DT600, the included accessories are of very high quality. In this photo, we can see that it ships with an MMCX removal tool and the 80 ohm adapter. Opening the box reveals the large hard plastic case that Audiosense is famous for in their higher end models. Package includes a good amount of tips, the earphones themselves, the quality cable that comes included with it, and a brush, as can be seen here, I guess to clean the mesh when needed, or the earphone itself. All in all, a fantastic package for an even better earphone. Let's get right into the sound quality. Bass is surprising. It doesn't sound like your typical dry, overly quick, and reach-limited all-BA bass that lesser IEMs existed. If you come in here with a preconceived notion of what balanced armature bass will sound like, popping these in your ear for a few minutes will dispel that completely. In fact, the DT600 sounds more like a high-quality dynamic driver is being used in the lower registers, and the all-balanced armature setup it contains is hidden in that regard. It's really something special. In stock form with not using the 80 ohm adapter, bass is prodigious in terms of output. Not necessarily bass head level, but noteworthy nonetheless. Mid bass is well controlled, and bleed into the mid range is kept at a minimum. This aids in the continued openness of sound of the Audiosense DT600. Bass has good impact and texture with notable clarity. Stella and Emotions Electric, two of the tracks I use from a guy called Gerald Simpson's album Automatic, show the DT600's ability to sound very dynamic driver-like in terms of presentation. With respect to bass frequencies, with full meaty bass, that was very satisfying. Still taken overall, the Audiosense DT600 presents a bass that is more DD than BA, more dynamic driver than balanced armature, being authoritative with good slam and reasonable rumble, suffering only slightly in absolute control. Only slightly in the absolute control, which is the only negative I can find with respect to the bass on the DT600. Well, when taking my preferences into consideration. Let's get to the mid-range. Very clean with excellent layering and detail retrieval. This is done without any sense of the mids becoming too clinical or cold. There is a natural warmth combined with outstanding clarity that sets the stage for a very engaging listening session. The DT600 really excels at wringing out the layers of details and texture. Very few IEMs I've listened to, unfortunately, with my limited exposure, have been able to do this, the K-Beer Believe being one of them. At times, I found it even momentarily distracting, as elements within tracks that were previously hidden on lesser IEMs were now front and center. This occurred with a track called 18th Street Lounging by Marcus Johnson. At the beginning, there's this high-pitched tone, and until now, I really only realized when listening to these, I thought it was one tone. It's actually two tones together. And this really separated that. It really was an eye-opener. I listened to the first opening, and it's only the opening 5-6 seconds of the track. I had to re-listen and put it on repeat many times. On Protection by Massive Attack, the DT600 projected Tracy Thorn's vocals sounding front and center with the subtle nuances laid bare. Very engaging. Anita Baker's Whatever It Takes sounded sublime on the DT600, with the ebb and flow of Baker's voice sounding unconstrained and full of emotion. Note weight is good. Transients are handled exemplary in an exemplary fashion. Very believable bite from percussion with a very natural fall off. Layering again, very good, making it easy to listen to the individual elements within even very busy tracks. The use of the 80 ohm resistor, though, does lead to a more prominent upper mid-range and treble region, but the bass is not as affected as can see from the graphs. The upper mids remain very clear, detailed without harshness. The Audiosense DT600, while being, again, very detailed, was moderately forgiving of tracks with questionable recording quality, which in earphones such as the Emoji Monica, this does not happen. So the Audiosense was somewhat forgiving of these tracks with lesser recording quality. This is very surprising, actually, considering all the detail and layering that's available in this earphone. It was a good surprise. In the mid-range, the DT600, through the option of the adapter, offers two distinct tuning targets. Each, though, shares some common ground when it comes to clarity, detail, and texture. I would say very well done. Now let's talk about the treble. Treble is interesting. Take this off as well. You can see the filter, the mesh. Beautiful build quality, very nice feel. Treble is well extended, smooth with ample air and sparkle. Detail retrieval, definition are also top notch. The treble was very nuanced. For example, in Ronnie Jordan's track, Vanston Place, 12 a.m., the cymbal work had this airy space around it that was a pleasure to listen to. The treble is clean, with no added embellishments such as excessive sheen or brittleness present in all too many earphones these days. Even considering it was fully BA equipped. BA timbre is minimal. It sounds very natural all around. Treble is well controlled and is with the rest of the frequency range, fits very well with any musical genre I threw at it. This plays well with jazz. It played well with house music. It played well with reggae, rock and roll, you name it, it played well. Imaging and soundstage. Well, the Audiosense DT600 throws out a wide soundstage with very precise instrument placement. This soundstage is wider than comparatively speaking to the height or the depth. But the DT600 excels at layering and imaging on well-recorded live tracks, for example, such as Stimula by Hugh Masekela, really made the whole venue come alive. It was incredible. The amount of placement, the engagement level on these is top-notch. So let's talk a little bit about some verses. Here we have the K-Bear Believe. Out of production, unfortunately. There's a company called Vento that came out with basically to Believe, but my understanding it's not tuned exactly the same. The Believe is considered a must-buy by many, including myself, something that I recommend. If you can get one, keep it in your collection of IEMs. Very excellent IEM. But sadly, it's out of production. With respect to the bass, the Believe has a thicker bass, but is a tad slower than the DT600. But when looking at definition and texture, the two are actually very, very close. Here's the Believe, really nice shell. Wider nozzle, nice mesh, just a nice build overall. Mid-range wise, the Believe is warmer and a touch more organic, although the DT600 does have a touch of warmth as well. Detail retrieval on the Believe is very good, but it's bested by the DT600, even slightly. The Believe is no slouch in that department, but the DT600 takes the crown when it comes to absolute detail retrieval. Treble is definitely a win for the DT600. With respect to extension, detail, air, and nuances, the Audiosense offering does flaunt its strengths here. Both are a must-buy, in my opinion, with the Believe definitely staying in my collection. Here we have the Moji Monica H2O, one of my faves as well. In my opinion, the Moji Monica H2O is basically a more refined and grown-up HZ Sound Heart Mirror. And this is the beloved HC Sound Heart Mirror. The Moji Monica, in my opinion, from my listening, is a more mature and grown-up heart mirror. It's also extremely picky with source, tips, and cable, much more so than pretty much any IAM I've used, even the K-Bear Believe, which I found was quite picky on that regard. The DT600 doesn't fall that far behind. It does benefit from careful and considerate cable and tip rolling, but nothing like the Moji Monica in that regard. That being said, bass output is significantly more pronounced with the DT600, but speed and definition are comparable, if just slightly better on the H2O in the bass. The DT600 level of separation, detail retrieval, and layering are more prominent or more apparent than that on the H2O. In the mid-range, clarity for both is very good, but the H2O is a more significant upper mid boost, a boost in the upper mid-range, pin of gain some may call it, and therefore is less forgiving of poor quality recordings than the DT600 is with its smoother approach. Treble again tilts in favor of the DT600, although the Moji Monica H2O does put up a good fight with its organic and well-controlled treble. Each has an extended and nuanced upper region, frequency region, and are a joy to listen to for extended periods. But when it comes to a mix of tracks you may have, the Moji Monica is less forgiving than the DT600, which, given its tuning, is a little bit more forgiving of lower quality tracks, while on the Moji Monica, it will say in your face, this is not recorded well, if you know what I mean. So let's talk a little bit about conclusion. I know it's been a long review, but the DT600 is definitely worth it. Audiosense is a definite winner here with the DT600, a combination of great quality, looks, and excellent performance. While some may argue that the utility of the 80 ohm adapter adds to the versatility of this wonderful IEM. Others may say it adds to the complication or the complicated manner of using it. I don't think so. We all have our preferences. You're going to use it or not based on how it sounds. The fact that it's included is a plus. It's a personal choice, really, that thankfully is available for you. They give you the option. At its asking price of $245 US, some will call it expensive. The Audiosense DT600 is not a budget unit. The truth is, its performance is in line with the asking price and even higher. If a detailed, articulate, and eminently engaging IM is what you are after, the Audiosense DT600 should be on your shortlist. It gets a very strong recommendation from Silicon Sounds. I want to thank you again for taking time to spend the time with us. I hope you enjoy the review. Please subscribe, comment below. We also have a Facebook presence soon. Actually, we're more involved in other groups on Facebook. Check out Chi-Fi Audio Reviews. I spend a lot of time in there, in a great group, and others as well. Audioreviews.org as well, and a few other groups. As well, you want to check out our Instagram presence. We're there, and we have a blog where all these reviews come out first. Silicon Sounds blog. All the links are below. Thanks again, and continue watching.